What's up guys, Shawnthebro here, and in today's episode of the Fighting Game Tutorial Series, we are going to be going over wall jumping. And wall jumping is a fun mechanic in a lot of fighting games, where if you are up against the corner or against a camera edge, you can actually jump off of the wall to get some distance or to get out of that corner that you're in. So this works two ways. It can be the actual edge of the map, like this, or it can actually be just the camera edge. Some games will do one or the other and not both, but I've decided to go with both. There are very simple solutions if you want to restrict it to just one of those camera boundaries. And of course, both sides are the same. So typically I can jump forward, vertically, or backward. But once I'm in the air, I can't jump no matter how much I spam. And then if I am to be up against the wall, I can jump and press the opposite direction of the wall to jump off of the wall as well. So I can jump vertically and then jump off of the wall at any point, or I can jump backward into the wall and jump off of the wall. So those little options there will give you some more freedom with your wall jumps. You can do them from either the neutral jump or your backward jump. You could actually use it to get some distance on your opponent. So say your opponent is trapping you here, this player that's crouching up and down can jump up and over them from the wall jump. Additionally, sometimes you can use attacks from wall jumps, or sometimes you can stick to the wall as well. So you can jump and actually get stuck on the wall at that point and delay your jump or delay your next move. So there are a lot of different options that you have with this wall jump functionality. Now, before we get started on this episode, if you want to get caught up in the series, I'll link you to this playlist right here in the top right corner. You can check out how we've done all the mechanics in this game, from projectiles, auto combos, super moves, and all these fancy things that we have going on. We're episode 194, so we're quite far along, but we still have a long way to go, and I'm excited for you guys to enjoy this journey with me. I also want to give a huge shout out to the Patreon and YouTube membership supporters that make this possible. Thank you guys for all the love and support. Really appreciate you all, and I'm so incredibly excited for what we can do in the future. If you all are interested in checking out the benefits, such as getting these templates for free when they are on the Epic Marketplace, feel free to check out the Patreon benefits at this link right here in the top right corner and see what you can gain from them. With all that out of the way, we can go ahead and get started. So this is a code and blueprint tutorial series. We are going to be working in a little bit of both today. So starting out in the code, we're going to go to our fighter template character.h. In here, I want to add a new enum value to my character state enum. So in this series, we have an E character state and an E combo state, as well as some other things like attack state. But the character state and the combo state are the main ones related to movement and animations. So the difference here is that the character state is really what the player is trying to tell the character to do, or what the AI is trying to tell the character to do, where the combo state is what the character is put into as a result of some other action. So the character state is where we want to add this one. I already have my neutral, forward, and backward jumping states in here, so I've added a wall jumping state. To do this, you can simply add a comma and add a new enum value. E_wall jumping is what I named mine, and I gave it a display name of wall jumping, so that's what it will display as in the blueprints. There is a variable that I want to add as well, and it is called the isTouchingWall boolean. So basically, I want to know if the character is up against the wall. This can be used for a lot of things, not just wall jumping. It can determine if you're in a corner and other things like that. But importantly here, if we know that we're touching the wall, we know we can perform the wall jump. You could do a check every time when you go to perform the wall jump input to see if you're touching the wall. But instead, I just recommend adding a boolean to determine if we're touching it or not. Again, we can use it for other things as well. So I just find it easier this way. So I have this boolean, isTouchingWall, and I made it a U property, which is edit anywhere, blueprint read write, with a category of movement. And we actually are going to set this in the blueprint with the collisions that we have. So you will want this U property, unless your camera boundaries are in the code, in which case you won't need to use it in the blueprint unless you choose to. Now, after making this boolean, we are done in the header file, so we can go to the CPP file. Let's go to our constructor, and let's set the default value for isTouchingWall. So if I scroll down, I set isTouchingWall to be false by default, because the characters do not start right up against the edges. They start more in the center of the stage, so they are not touching it when they are spawned in. Alright, now let's scroll down to the move right function. This is the next logic that we're going to want to fill out. In my series, I have a move right and a move right controller. They are essentially the same thing. They're only different for a few things like dead zones. And so the same logic needs to be applied in both, but you may only have one function, so you won't have to do this 2 times. But I've already filled out the one in Move Right, and then I will go through the one on Move Right controller live. That way you can see exactly what I'm doing and make it a little bit easier on yourself. Now, if you've been following the series, my Move Right function is huge, so yours will be as well. But what's really important here is we want to go to the logic where we check to see if the character is not crouching and not crouch blocking. This check just determines what images, what icons we should display for the input stack. So we want to skip that and the else related to it. So here's the if statement. I'm going to follow it down until I get to an else statement right here. I'm going to skip this as well. Now I get to some other logic in here. I'm going to keep going until I get to an if statement where we check to see if we can move and we're not in these corresponding states. Crouching, crouch blocking, blocking, and we have no combo state. The reason we check for this initially is because we're checking to see if we can actually move the character or for if any reason they are grounded. So if you're crouching, we don't allow them to crouch walk at the current time, and same with crouch blocking. If they're blocking, same rules apply. And if they're in any sort of combo state, say they're launched or they're stunned, we don't allow them to move. So if they're not all these things, they can move, in which case we will go here. This if statement is now being used to check to see if we were in any of the jumping states, so neutral jumping, forward jumping, or backward jumping. We were also checking to make sure we weren't launched at this point. I've added a new check in here today, which is to check against the wall jumping state. The reason we don't want to be in any of these states while we're calling the move right function is because we don't want the player to have control over the character while they're in those states. If you're jumping, the jump has to complete before the player regains control. They can still do attacks, but they can't move left and right freely. They already have that horizontal and vertical momentum that they got from the jump, so the player can't influence them. And this is no different for the wall jump. So in this if statement where we're checking for the 3 jumping states, I would add an and just also check against this new state as well, the wall jumping state. So and character state is not equal to e character state : e wall jumping. Now, one thing I noticed while I'm doing this is that I have a check above to make sure that the combo state is none before doing this, before going into this if statement. And then I also have an if check in here to make sure that the combo state is not launched, but we don't really need to do that. We're already checking to make sure that it is none. There is no combo state. I'm actually just going to remove this if condition here and clean that up a little bit, because now this becomes easier to read. Now this is just being used to make sure the character state is not equal to neutral jumping, and the character state is not equal to forward jumping, and the character state is not equal to backward jumping, and the character state is not equal to wall jumping. Now, after that, we're going to follow this one more time, and we're going to go to the else if. So we're basically doing the opposite of the if statement. We're checking to see if the character state is equal to neutral jumping, or the character state is equal to forward jumping, or the character state is equal to backward jumping. At this point, we can go into this logic, and this is where we can perform the wall jump, but we can still only perform it if we're pressing the right direction. We don't want to automatically perform the wall jump when the character is jumping and they're on a camera edge or a camera boundary. They do have to be pressing the proper input. Now, we are in the move right function. Move right is being called constantly, tracking the value, the horizontal movement, so if we're moving left, right, or if we're not touching any of those inputs to move us left or right. So we can check against the value to make sure that we are pressing in the proper direction and that we are facing the direction we need to be to perform the jump that way. So for this first case here, I'm checking to see if my value is greater than 0.01f. Now, for me, my value is -1 is to the left, 0 is neutral, 1 is to the right. So a value of greater than 0.01 is a value to the right. Some sort of value to the right. So the player is pressing to the right, and we want to make sure that they are facing to the right. Now, if they are facing to the right and they are pressing right, and at this point we know that they're in a jumping state from this if statement above, and they are touching the wall, then we have met all the conditions to perform the wall jump. So I'm going to set my character state equal to the new character state we made, our e character state : e wall jumping. And then I'm going to call this function custom launch character. Now, if you haven't been following the series, it's okay. You can use the standard launch character function here. I have the custom launch character because I am trying to make all of my launches use the same system. When we get into things like rollback, we can't use the standard physics from something like launch character, and so I need it to be more specific to the system we're working with. So I'm using my custom launch character, but it's okay if you just use your regular launch character here. And a quick refresher, my custom launch character takes in the vector of the launch and if we should override. So it basically just takes in all the functions that launch character does, but it does some other things internally inside the function to make it a little bit more optimized for when we have to update it to rollback in the future. Long story short, at this point we want to launch the character. So I call my custom launch character function, or just your launch character function, and I'm making a new f vector. I have 0 on the x because the x is the depth, so how close to the camera or far away from the camera you are. In a 2.5D fighter, we don't need to worry about that. We don't want to worry about that, so we don't want to launch them any distance on the x-axis. Then I have my horizontal distance, which is my jump distance. I already have a variable for this, and this is how I do my standard jumps. You could change it for the wall jump distance if you want, but I thought using the standard jump distance was fine. Of course, you can multiply it by some sort of multiplier if you want. And I multiplied my jump height by half to get the height of the wall jump. So it's only half as high as my standard jump will be. These two booleans are for if it should override the X, Y, and the Z axis. Basically, do you want to stop the movement on the character and just use this launch on the character instead of any momentum that they already had? And I say yes. I want the wall jump to override any other movement that the character currently had. So I set both of these to true. Alright, and now we can go into this else if statement here. So the else if is the other condition. There is another condition when we can wall jump, and it is the opposite. So this is if we're pressing to the right and we're facing to the right, but we're still touching the wall. The other case is if we're pressing to the left, we're facing to the left, and we're touching the wall. So else if the value is less than negative 0.01f. So we're pressing to the left, and we are not facing right, which means we are facing left, and we are touching the wall. Then we want to go in here and do the same exact logic that we just did with one minor change, and that is to make the jump distance negative. You could put a little negative sign here, or you could multiply it by -1, whatever you want to do. But basically, just do the same logic we already did in the if statement with a negative jump distance, so we had the opposite direction. And now we can go down to the move right controller function, and it's really going to be the same thing. So I'm going to do it live with you, just in case anything lost you. That's perfectly fine. We're going to go here. We're going to say, this is not what we need, but we're going to follow the if statement down to the else. And we know this if and this else relate to the input stack. So we're going to skip all that. Then we're going to skip any logic in the middle here, and we're going to go to where we check to see if we can move, but we're not crouching, crouch blocking, and we're in no sort of combo state. Then we're checking to see if the character state is not equal to neutral jumping, and it's not equal to forward jumping, and it's not equal to backward jumping. I'm going to remove this combo state, checking for launched, since it cannot be from the if statement above. So I'm going to remove that condition, and I'm going to add a different condition as well. I'm going to check and make sure the character state is not equal to character state _wall jumping. Perfect. And now we have this if statement set up properly. We're going to follow it down to the else here. And we're going to add a new else if in here. And the condition in here is if the character state is equal to character state neutral jumping, or character state equal to character state forward jumping, or character state is equal to character state backward jumping. And if it is, we know that we are in one of the possible states to allow us to wall jump. So we are going to check to see if we have the correct other parameters that we need. So we're going to check and see if the value that's passed into move right controller is greater than 0.01f and the character is facing right. So they're pressing to the right and they're facing right and is touching wall. All right, and then let's set up the else here. Else if the value is less than negative 0.01f, meaning they're moving to the left, and they're not facing right, meaning they are facing to the left, and they are touching the wall. Now we want to just add our logic for the actual wall jump. So we are going to set the character state equal to e character state ::e underscore wall jumping. Do that for both of these if statements. And we want to call our custom launch character. And we want to make an f vector in here for the parameter. And we want to use 0.0f for the x-axis. The jump distance is the y-axis. And the jump height is the z-axis. And I multiplied it by 0.5f to make it a little bit smaller. Then I want to override my x and y movement, and I want to override my z movement. This way, the wall jump has the full momentum. It's not affected by the other things that the character was doing at that time. And I can copy this custom launch character, but if I do that, I have to make sure to set the jump distance to be negative when going to the left. And there we go. The move right controller is also set up the same way that move right is now. So both of those will work if you've been following the series. If you haven't been, you may only have one move right, in which case you only need to do it in one of those functions. Okay. And now the next thing I would do is check and make sure that any locations that you are using the forward jump, backward jump, or neutral jump, also check for this wall jump if needed. So I'll show you what I mean by that. I'm going to check character state equal e character state ::e underscore neutral jumping. So I press Control F to get this little find box up here, and then I'm going to search through the current document, and I'm going to see where I use this, and I'm going to make sure that I check for the wall jumping enum as well, since we just added it. So for example, in the landed function, you can see I checked to see if the character was neutral jumping, forward jumping, backward jumping, and now I want to check to see if they're wall jumping as well, because this if statement determines if we had landed from a jump. If it goes into the else, it is likely going to be from something like a launcher, which is going to create a different effect. So we want to make sure in this if statement, we also add this or character state equal character state : :e underscore wall jumping. That's my landed function. Now you may have others, but that's actually the only one that I have. We don't want to do it here. This is the logic we just added, and we don't want to wall jump if we're already wall jumping. So there's no reason to add it here. And same with move right controller. So the only place for me was landed, but I did want to bring it up. If you have other places as well, you want to add this check in here, make sure to do that. Now there's one other thing I want to do in here, and that is the check that we just had, and we just did this for. I want to also use not equal to character state equal e character state : :e underscore neutral jumping. Wherever we are using this, we should also be using wall jumping. And you can see here is in my move right. We've already updated it in this one earlier in the episode. This is my move right controller, which we've already updated earlier in the episode. But there is one case of this as well, and that is inside the tick function. The tick function flips the characters based on if they're on the left or the right side. And we don't flip the characters while they are jumping. We wait for them to land to flip around. So the character state is not equal to jumping. If it's not equal to forward jumping and it's not equal to backward jumping, we were able to flip the character. But if you don't want them to flip off of the wall jump, like I did not, then I also added character state not equal to e character state wall jumping. That is all of the code done for the wall jumping. So we can go into the editor. I'm going to launch again. All right, the editor is back open, and now we're going to go into the animation blueprint for the character. And we're going to set up this animation. So I have a relatively complicated little jumping state machine here. My state machine as a whole is very complicated, but we have the ability to go forward jump, backward jump, and attacks off of each of those, as well as the standard neutral jump and attack off of that. Then I have this end jump, which is basically just what I want the mutant to look like before he hits the ground. So this is after any of the jumps have finished. Now the jumps can return to idle or to any state before if they end up colliding with the ground and change their state. But I don't want them to just keep replaying the same jump animation as they're going through the air. So that's why I have this end jump state. A lot of this actually isn't super important. All you really need to know for today's episode is that I have this new wall jump state. And in here, I have my animation that I want to play when the character jumps off the wall. Now, I am actually using my forward jump here, which has an additional anim notify, but this isn't required. The custom launch character that we did will override this. This is only useful for the forward jump, and I just happen to use the same animation. So you can safely ignore this anim notify. But this is the animation that I use when I push off the wall, so when the character actually does the wall jump. So let's go ahead and make a new state. Right click, add state, and I called it wall jump. And in this state, I have an animation that I want to play, and like I said, I don't want it to loop, so I'm going to disable the loop animation. Now, to be able to get to the wall jump, I can do it from a neutral jump or a backward jump. That's it. So I've made a shared transition rule, which has become literally the worst color imaginable. So I can barely see it standing a few inches away from my screen, so I'm not sure how it will look for you. But it is this dark gray on gray background, and it goes from end jump to wall jump and backward jump to wall jump. The reason for this is because my standard neutral jump is this animation right here. It is so incredibly quick that it is very rare to be able to go from start jump to wall jump, and it can make it look ugly trying to blend between these animations. So for me, I just went from end jump to wall jump, and then wall jump can return back to end jump once it is finished. So basically, even if the character has reached the peak of their jump and they're starting to fall down, they can still wall jump at that point. So like I said, make a transition rule from end jump to wall jump, and one from backward jump to wall jump. Now, I made it a shared rule, so they're going to share this. They're going to be the same transition rule. But let's go into it. So end jump to wall jump. All I do is I grab my character reference, or the owner of this animation blueprint, and I grab the character state off that. I check to see if it's equal enum to the wall jumping character state. If it is, it means it can transition to this state. And if it can, we'll play the animation in here. Then we want to return to a state after that. I have the wall jump always returning to end jump after that. And so to do that, I have a transition rule from wall jump to end jump, and it is automatic rule based on sequence player and state. And really what that means is once the animation is finished, if it can't go to another animation, it will automatically take this one. Now, like I said, I made the end jump to wall jump a shared rule. So basically, if you have a transition rule that you want to use the same logic for from multiple states to transition to other states, you can make that rule shared instead of writing it all out again. And to do this, once you have your state that you want, you can press promote to shared. It'll be right here. So if I am on an unshared state, I can use promote to shared, and it will ask you to name it. I named this one wall jump, and so now I can use the wall jump shared rule whenever I want. So my backward jump to wall jump, I just also set to use the wall jump shared transition rule. I don't have any transition events on the backward jump to wall jump or the end jump to wall jump, but all of my jumps to the end jump state do have this end jump transition. So forward jump to end jump has end jump transition, backward jump to end jump has end jump transition, and same with the attacks as well. Start jump doesn't, because start jump really just plays for a few frames and goes immediately to end jump. Doesn't mean you couldn't use end jump transition on it, but I never put it because I never needed it. However, I am going to put it on this wall jump to end jump. So if you do have anim notifies in there, just be mindful you may want to use them on the wall jump to the end jump as well. And just so you all are aware of what end jump transition does, it just resets some of my variables. It's not super important for today's episode, but could be a quick reminder if you've been following the series for why we use that. So there you go. At this point, our animation blueprint is set up. There's only one more thing we need to do, and that is determine if we are touching a wall or not. And to determine if we are touching the wall, what we want to do is go into the character blueprint. I'm going to go to my base character BP, and this is a really simple thing we can do. So I have logic for on component hit. When we hit our opponent and we start colliding with them, we can push them, and that's pretty good. But we don't want to have a hit for the wall because we want to know anytime we're up against the wall, we are touching it. And a hit is more like when I collide with them, I'll trigger the hit. But if you're just constantly sitting there touching them, you won't continuously trigger the hit. Instead, we want to use an overlap for that. And so if we use event actor begin overlap and actor end overlap, then we can actually figure out when the actor is colliding with the wall. Now, the reason I'm using the actor begin overlap and the actor end overlap here is because the components may not overlap with the wall, even if the actor does as a whole. And particularly, this can be useful if you do get into more advanced hurtbox logic. We already have some of it present. So I want to just have, if anything in this actor is overlapping with the wall, we will be able to do this. You can make it work with the components. So if you want to do that, do it. I do it with the on component hit. But it will function a little bit differently, and it might not give the result that you want unless you're really careful with it. The actor begin overlap is genuinely easier here, and it still works 100% of the time, so I would recommend just using this method for now. But do what you're comfortable with. And so to get these events, you can simply type event actor begin overlap. I already have it, but it is this right here. If you don't have it, it will spawn it in the graph. And we want actor end overlap. They come with an other actor node, and that is the actor that this actor is colliding with. So the actor that the base character blueprint is colliding with. We want to check and see if that is one of the walls, which I have as a camera edge class. So the camera edge class are my walls. They're the movable inner walls and the outer walls as well. So I can drag off the other actor and cast to camera edge. And if this succeeds, it means it is either a camera edge or a child of that class. So if this succeeds, and only if it succeeds, we know we are touching the wall, what we're calling the wall. So I can now right click and say set is touching wall and check it. We are touching the wall at this point. We don't have to use the camera edge for anything. We're just making sure that the cast succeeds so we know we're touching the right object. Now the end overlap is the exact same logic. We just have this actor end overlap. We have the other actor. We're going to cast it to a camera edge. Then we want to say set is touching wall, but this time we want to set it as false. Because if we've ended the overlap with this actor, we're no longer touching the wall. And it is that simple. So now if we go into the game and play it, we should be able to jump off of the wall. And so we can jump and jump, and everything looks like it's working. Player 1 and player 2 can both do it. We can only do this when we're jumping off the wall or touching the wall. We can't just do it when we're in the air. We can't do it just because we're touching another enemy. It's got to be a wall. And there you go. That is how you can create wall jumping in your fighting game. So I hope you all enjoyed, and I hope you learned something about wall jumping, and if you did, please subscribe. It does more for myself in the series than anything else you can do, and I just really appreciate it. I want to give another shout out and thank you to my Patreon members and YouTube membership supporters. Thank you guys for all the love and for keeping this series alive. I'm incredibly grateful. If you had any issues with this tutorial or any of my tutorials, feel free to join the Discord community. There's a link in the description. And like I said, guys, that's all I got, so thank you so much for watching. I'm Shawnthebro, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye, guys.